Hello, this is Quinn Curtis, and I am so excited to be with you again today. This is the Inflow on Fire podcast, and we're going to dive in a little bit deeper today about those stories that are going on inside of our heads that keep us from experiencing life in a way that is truly harmonious, that feels good, that we can stand in gratitude and appreciation and really be the best versions of ourselves. And as we discussed in the last episode, it really is those stories in our mind that are keeping us from that. And they are not impossible to break through with just a simple skill and strategy like using Byron Katie's inquiry process. We can very quickly get to the heart of the story and let it go and get back to the reality that's in front of us that is always kinder than the stories we tell about our reality. So I wanted to just follow up. I had said a little bit about my story over the past couple of months of my transition with my job and what a difficult transition that had been, and how much this process of inquiry and really looking at stories has helped. And I wanted to just give a little bit of context of where that has led me. One of the things that I think is a really important story for us all to evaluate is our story about what life is and what death is. Which I would call a story because I think they're both related and similar, or if not the same thing. But there's a topic in Stoicism, or a concept in Stoicism, that I really value called memento mori. And it stands for remember that you will die, which sounds very grotesque. You might even be like reaching to trade to it, not listen to this podcast episode anymore. You're like, oh, this doesn't sound like a very happy episode, and I want a little boost of inspiration and insight. But I'm excited to share with you some insights that I have about how I think this actually is an exciting topic and an energizing topic, and a way that helps us to orient our lives really powerfully and give them meaning in a way that no other thing really can in life. It is that aspect of our life being finite, of not lasting forever, that helps to give our life meaning. And so two things I wanted to share is, first of all, deciding what we're going to do with this time that we have between our life and death. Is a really valuable thing for us to look at. I think it's very easy to find ourselves trying to live for other people or live for others' expectations, living in that space of I should be doing this, I must do this, I have to do this, and really not stopping often enough to ask if it's true. And so one of the things, or the way that this process kind of looked in my mind over the past couple of months, is I've been in a space of being the primary breadwinner in our household for many, many years. In a lot of ways, I have been able to make, double to triple, sometimes even quadruple what my husband is able to make. And so there's been this really strong belief in our household that I have to work and I have to provide because I make the most money, or I can make the most money. And it left me feeling very, very stuck in having to stay in that career, doing that work. And so that was one of the stories. Another one of the stories is we have to stay in this house. We have to stay in this area with these schools so that my kids have the experiences that we want them to have. And there was even some scary stories in my mind around, if we lost this house, or if we moved away from this house, we couldn't stay here, couldn't keep them going to these schools. Would they hate me? Would it ruin their lives? Would they have to go to therapy years later? Haha, like we all joke about as parents. If you're a parent listening and you've got a therapy fund in your mind, you know what I mean? And even believing that like I could ruin their lives potentially by not keeping this house and not keeping us living in this space. And those stories were enough for many, many years to keep me working, over 40 hours a week, typically more around like 50 to 60 hours a week, working constantly, believing that the primary value that I was bringing to my family was financially. And of course, I've been on a personal development path. I've tried to be my best self and be a good person, teach my kids, be there when they need me. But primarily, my life was oriented to providing for my family. Absolutely. 95% of my efforts. And so my kids and my family, my household, my health were quite often getting the leftovers, the scraps of my energy, because I was just investing so much in just trying to keep the house, trying to keep the income, trying to create the lifestyle that I thought we had to have so that I would be a good mom and I would be taking good care of my kids and giving them the life that they needed. And so when my job changed over the past couple months, it really got me looking at those stories. And I did use inquiry from Byron Katie for a lot of those stories to really look at, well, is it true? Is it true that I can mess up their lives by us not living here? Is it true that we have to live in this home and have to live in this area for them to have a good life and have what they need? Is it true that I have to be the provider, that we can't live on my husband's income or in another way of making money? Is it true that I have to be a marketer for the rest of my career path in order for us to be okay, right? All of these stories came out. And I believe that this is one of the most beautiful situations that life often offers us. There's a goddess in Hinduism called Kali Ma. And when she comes in with her swords blazing and fire, and she is ready to cut down anything that is not in alignment and to just, some of those things that we hang on to and we're like, no, I really need this and I really want this, is able to like help us get it out of our life. I've got this cute sticker of the Buddha and it says over it, let that shit go. Like it's that kind of vibe, right? Where it's like, is that really serving you? Do you really need that? Can you let it go? And so that's where I think when life gives us those moments of remembering that, which this episode, I hope will spark some of that for you to really say, what are those stories that are keeping me stuck and keeping me believing life has to be this way, and lay them all out on the table and look at what is actually real. Then it gets us into this space where we can play with life, where we're a lot more flexible with life. And we don't have to strangle and manipulate our life circumstances to be exactly a certain way for us to be okay. And so what happened is I did this and laid it all out on the table. I realized, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Let's say I don't take another job as a marketing executive, and instead I be an artist like I've been wanting to, an artist and an illustrator and a speaker, right? Let's say I take that path, and what's the worst that could happen? Okay, so we lose the house, quote unquote. Would we have to lose it? No, we could sell it and we could even pay off some debts. We could start our new life with some equity because the homes in our area are selling with a lot of great equity right now, right? So even that worst case scenario isn't too bad. What if we can't find another place to live or in this area, or we can't buy another home? Worst case scenario, well, we have a camper. Maybe we go and we live in our camper for a little while. And I just it sounds funny saying it out loud, but I had to really look at each of these scenarios in the eye and say, would I be okay? And would I be more okay than where I am right now, which is really stressed, feeling like I should and I have to, and it has to be this way. And I could see how in each of those scenarios, if we lived in a camper, even if we were in a camper and I was able to paint and it felt aligned and like I was finally at peace and I was accepting my life and in harmony with my life, then I could see a way that could work. Like, would it be the same level of comfort that we are enjoying now? No, but I also looked around at all of our possessions and in our home, and I could see it hanging like a noose around my neck. It actually didn't feel that comfortable. And I could see even the ways that I have been using money and being able to buy things and have that kind of income as a crutch to try to insulate my life from feeling the pain and the discomfort that I was feeling of continually forcing myself to do work that did not fully light me up, that wasn't fully aligned with what I really, really wanted to be doing. And so I could see myself even letting go of all the things. So then my family and I, we had this crazy dream of maybe moving someday to Europe and like going and having an incredible European adventure, even like a summer in Europe or something. And so I could even see there, like, okay, looking around in our household and I'm seeing all sorts of our possessions, and I'm looking at, what would be so valuable that I would have to take it. And so much of our belongings, even from that kind of a lens, felt like they were not that valuable, like they were not crucial. We could live happily without them. And so it all started to just really, I think I started to see the reality of what was actually in my life and the choices that I was actually making that were compromising me being able to have the beautiful life I've been craving and dreaming of. So fast forward to I finally decide like, hey, well, let's go for like choosing into what we really want. Let's see what happens. And so I decided I would love to go back to art school. I would love to not take a career as a marketing executive, and I would love to do some consulting on the side and really focus on my art, be there for my kids and my family in this season, especially as my kids are all going to be graduating over the next couple of years from high school, starting next spring. And so as I made that choice and felt really aligned and clear about that and willing to accept whatever the consequences might be, and felt aligned with my husband on some level, he was obviously had some fears and anxieties about this. It was a big shift for him as well. But as we just opened up the possibility and said, hey, we'd like this, let's see what could happen. And if it's meant to be, it's going to show up and we'll be able to figure out a way for me to do it and for it to be okay for our family. And if we get to stay in this home, then cool, that will be so exciting and we'll be so grateful. But we're not going to force staying in this home. We're not going to force making any of these things happen. And so we just kind of kept trying to take the next aligned step and then the next aligned step. And so what that led to is one day my husband is at work and he randomly overhears them talking about this new position that they're opening that pays a lot more than he's been earning. And he talks to them and says, hey, I might be interested in that. And one thing leads to another. They interview him and they're like ecstatic because they believe he is their top pick of all the people that they could have hired or could have thought of for this position. They didn't even dream he'd be interested, and we're so excited that he was interested and it felt aligned for him. And it's ending up going to be a really cool career move for him. We also have a way that we've been earning residual income through doTERRA randomly. And we had a cool opportunity come up with that where we're now going to be increase our income pretty naturally through that as well. And so it just happened in very surprising ways. We haven't had income changes with doTERRA or my husband's work in forever, or maybe like years and years and years. These were both very, very big surprises. I did not see them coming, and I couldn't have forced them into existence. And so it just really showed up in helping us see, wow, we can make it. We can actually stay in the home. We can afford for me to go back to art school and to really focus in there and be home with our family. And I get to support my husband in this new cool career move for him. And life is all aligning, la-di-da. This is amazing, right? And then we head into like day one of this new life starting and the fears and the stressors that have been keeping me from taking this step for so many years. Those stories then arise and show up for me to deal with. So stories about, does my worth as a person go down if I am no longer this important, highly respected marketing executive and professional? Do I still, I've hid behind this shield of busyness for a long time because of not quite knowing how to draw boundaries. And so it's been a piece of what's been enticing about working over 40 hours a week and being in a super important role in a company or with my own company is I've been able to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just too busy, I can't do that, or oh, I just don't have time, right? Well, now without that shield, I have to learn how to develop my own healthy boundaries without relying on that type of a crutch. And so it's just interesting. And the reason why I'm sharing all this is just to share, how our stories really do impact the way that we experience and work with reality, work with what's in front of us. There is definitely a part of me that would be more comfortable just getting another marketing executive position and not taking this leap of faith, not going back to art school, not leaning in to what I really want to be doing. It would be easier, quote unquote, to just do what we had been doing. And I believe that's part of why I did it for so long. And I hope you can relate, because I think we all do this in certain ways. And truthfully, I would have continued to push my dream for years and years and years down the road. I was building up that dream for someday, that ever elusive someday. And it would have never come, I believe, because there was just, it was too comfortable, quote unquote, in my current reality, as uncomfortable as it was. And so, one of the things that really helped spark courage to be able to look at this really honestly and to lay it all out on the table was to be able to really reckon with, hey, I'm going to turn 40 this year. And good grief, it's already been 40 years and my life is not where I thought it would be. In some ways, so much better. In other ways, shoot, I feel like I haven't fully lived, right? And thinking about, what would some of those deathbed regrets be? And one that I saw is I just could feel, and I felt this for a while, but like if you spiritually or energetically were to take me and turn me upside down and shake me out, all of these books would fall out of me. All these children's books and adult books and like all these books and paintings and pictures would fall out of me. And I realized like how sad I would be if I lived my whole life just trying to stay in what I should do and believing that was the only way and dying with those books inside of me. Like, what a waste, right? And so I am recognizing, the extreme luxury that I have of being able to have support financially and from my spouse in being able to do this. And I always think, when I talk to others and they say, oh, you're just so lucky your husband supports you, I think it's important to recognize that I wouldn't still be with him if he didn't, right? That is a deal breaker for me, that we need to be in sync and true partners and aligned as equals, of both having a say in what our life looks like and being able to work together in that. And I'm not aligned with being in partnership with somebody who it's their way or the highway. And so that is part of the reason why I have that support. And I believe if I didn't have it from my husband, it would come in another way if it was aligned, right? And so, just I didn't believe that this was possible in my life for years. That's why I haven't done it until now. That's why it took getting to be 40 and being let go from a job that I loved to even be able to look at it seriously, to even contemplate it, right? And take it seriously. And so I just think it's important to honor and recognize that there are the stories that are keeping us from doing what our heart and soul is wanting us to do. They look really big and really scary. But I think a great balancing story to that is recognizing that, hey, we all are going to die. That is the one sure thing in life, outside of change, right? Is that we are going to die. And I think that when we can make some peace with our death and recognize that it is, see it in a way that, like I love the Deathly Hallows in Harry Potter and how, the one wizard keeps evading death until it's time. And then at that time, it's one of my favorite lines in anything that J.K. Rowling has written. She says something to the effect of, and when it was time, he welcomed death as an old friend. Like, I think there's that to me is what that memento mori kind of concept means and signifies, is being able to be, welcome death as an old friend, that old friend that helped you make good choices with the time you had in between your birth and your death so that you didn't leave this world with regrets. I think that it's very easy, especially for those of us who are parents, and not, for us to very easily just justify living our lives for other people. And I think there's a common deathbed regret that so many of us have heard of, like, hey, nobody ever says, I wish I would have spent more time at the office, right? And it's kind of pushed down the value of prioritizing what we want to make with our lives, what we want to create professionally, or, do to exchange value out in the world. And it's minimized that and instead put relationships as the very top thing, which I think is one of the reasons why I certainly stayed in that trap where I was like, gosh, it doesn't matter what I'm doing professionally in some ways, as long as I am providing for my family and I'm there for them as much as I can be, right? It was like sacrificing my own health, and sacrificing my own dreams in order to kind of prioritize those relationships, or I thought I was, right? And what I think is really valuable to recognize is that one of the other biggest deathbed regrets is not doing what we wanted to do, not following that thing that was in our heart and actually taking action. And so when you consider both of those elements, you've got, relationships that you're excited to connect and be with people in this life and spend your life in connection and communion and community. And then on the other side, there is this part of us that wants to express itself, that wants to offer our gift to the world, that wants to make the world a little better, leave it better than we found it. And it's that part of us that I think is very easy to connect with our professional lives. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't do that in all sorts of professions. I believe that I could do that in other ways other than being an artist and an illustrator and a speaker, but that the being an artist, illustrator, and speaker is the way that's calling me forward. And it's when I'm ignoring that or minimizing that or saying it's impossible, that then I'm not able to bring the gift through that avenue that I'm excited to bring to the world, and that I would be sad on my deathbed that I hadn't given. And so it's just an interesting opportunity to really evaluate in our lives, just what really matters to you, and what would you be really sad if you didn't give that gift to the world? What would you be sad if you didn't do or create or make happen? And then what's holding you back from actually doing it? And so you can even use that inquiry process that we talked about in the last episode to really document these stories in your head that are keeping you stuck, and use that inquiry process to get to what's real and what's true, so that you can start to sort through it and actually get your life more in alignment and less living in fear and suppression. And so I just, in closing, wanted to share a comforting story that I have leaned on that has helped me find greater peace with the concept of death. Because I think that when we find a little peace there, it helps open up some breathing room with what to do with life. I think when we're very, very scared of death, then it makes us almost fight or flight from it, right? So we either fight it by like not believing that it's going to really happen to us or those that we care about, or running away from it, like continuing to distract ourselves from actually doing what we came here to do and living the lives we want to live, and kind of running away from that inevitability of hitting that moment where we are out of time here. And so when instead we can shift into a space of openness, even friendship, with the possibility that everything will come to an end, the people that we love the most are going to die, we're going to die, and that was always a part of the plan, and that's a major part of what brings meaning and clarity into our lives. I think it changes things significantly. So I wanted to just share, when my grandmother was dying, it's been 5 or 6 years ago, I shared this story with her, and it's just one of the reasons why I have a lot of passion and excitement about illustrating and authoring, because I think there are beautiful stories like this that can bring a lot of comfort and can help us remember what's real and what's true and help us to be brave with what's in front of us. And so my grandmother was dying, and she had lived quite a long life. She was in her early 90s, I believe. And she kind of went into her last little moments of life, her last week or so of life, with a lot of anxiety. And she had had a lot of anxiety in her life. She was very nervous about the next step. She was very in resistance about it being her time to go. She was not ready. She was fighting it. And it was leaving her feeling very uncomfortable with that moment. And so, seeing that she was struggling and suffering, honestly, during that last little season of her life, I just felt really inspired to go in and visit with her and sit with her and tell her this little story that has brought a lot of comfort. And the story is inspired by there's a reference made to this type of concept, but not this exact story, in the book Swamplands of the Soul, New Life in Dismal Places by James Hollis. He is a Jungian analyst. It's an incredible, incredible book. But the concept is basically that, when you were a baby, we should say, when you were a baby and you were in the womb, that was all you knew. And then it must have felt like death when it was time to be born. And so the way that I told this story to my grandma, and it just eased her mind, and I could see her just relax into her next phase and trust, is the way I'll tell it to you now. So once upon a time, there's a beautiful little baby, and it was swimming around in all of this lovely, warm amniotic fluid in its mother's belly. And all it knew was darkness and muffled noises and the warmth of the liquid. All it knew was eating through a tube in its stomach, and didn't know what breathing was or air was or what the world was. And to the baby, that whole womb was its world. And then one day, the water started to move, and the baby started to be pushed and squeezed, and it hurt and it was uncomfortable and it felt like dying, until the baby was brought into this new space of this world where it found life and a new way of living, where suddenly it could breathe through its mouth, and it could eat through its mouth, and it could smile, and it could see all the colors and the lights and the people that loved it surrounding it. And that someday, when it's time for this baby to pass from this life into the next life, it might feel a little bit like coming into this life, but to remember, that we don't know that something beautiful isn't on the other side, just like it was this time. And so just that little concept, I think, can bring a lot of comfort. We've already done it. We've already been through that birth canal, each and every one of us. That's how we got here. Or you got through by a cesarean section. That would be, that was your birth canal, like coming through the abdomen, right? But however you got here, you lived that other reality. That was all you knew of what life was. And the idea of being able to eat or breathe or see or touch or hold or be held was foreign to you, right? You couldn't even comprehend it because it wasn't your reality. But then when you made the transition, like a whole new world opened up to you. And so it's been a very comforting way for me to approach and think about death, no matter what, religious or spiritual overtones you or I might have around death and what actually happens there. I think that this story brings a lot of comfort, or this idea a lot of comfort, because it is so simple and so practical of, oh yeah, I've already done that. So how do I know what's on the other side of death? And so, I think to make friends with life, we have to make friends with that concept of death on some level, of at least being at peace with it. And the best way that I've found to be at peace with some of these things is that I don't know mind, that space that says, I don't know for sure what's going to be on the other side. So when I have beliefs about it's going to be so scary, or my reality is going to be over, or I'm going to not be with the people I love, I taking that to inquiry of like, do you know that that's true? Can you absolutely know that that is true? No, because none of us have done it, right? And so then who are you when you believe those thoughts? And how do you live your life when you believe those thoughts? Probably really stressed and overwhelmed and frustrated, and in that fight or flight with your own reality of your mortality, versus who would you be without those thoughts? Who would you be if you believed the transition into the next phase, no matter how your death happens, is going to be just as sweet and just as good as the transition that brought you here into this world? So I hope that these thoughts are encouraging and inspiring to you. I know they're not easy things to think about, but I've found so much liberation in being able to have some breathing room around these concepts, and to really be able to evaluate my life from a more objective space instead of a reactive space of living in that fight or flight and in fear ultimately. So here I am, just cheering you on and living with a little bit more courage and bravery this week and in this day, in what to do with your big and beautiful life. It matters. You matter. And I hope you have a just beautiful day with taking these thoughts and looking at your stories and connecting in with the kindness and the beauty of life that surrounds you.